moved to the States a while ago. So I joined, then got a full scholarship to University of Florida. So I did my undergrad in political science, leadership, and photojournalism. Graduated in 2009, and then started to work in multimedia and for a company called Africare. In 2012, my father fell a little ill, so I moved back to Ghana, and I pitched a tech radio show idea to Global Media Alliance and YFM, and the Empower show on YFM was born. So it was MPWR, and what we did was quite a number of my friends, peers had been working at Mast, started their own businesses. So we used the radio show to kind of open up what is really going on in entrepreneurial space, and feature a lot of techies, because there wasn't that much space or room for techies to explain, hey, what their product development was, what it meant to be an entrepreneur within our context. And gratefully, it received a couple of accolades and awards, and I was poached and I joined the Google Ghana team as a project manager, and went on to become curator for YouTube Huddle. So it was also really good because I was then able to rally some of Google's resources in order to help our entrepreneurs tell their own stories digitally and able to communicate beyond just the space that they were in. I also worked for an agency called Now Available, and we were able to do some really exciting campaigns, asking people to share their stories online, share their dreams, and collaborate. And so there was a truck that did about 16 different African cities, and I was able to join on some of the locations, and we were able to crowdsource some of these things. And then I also then joined Impact Hub as the director for digital and design innovation. And so then it was almost like a continuation of my own personal journey and how do we promote Ghana digitally and online. At Google Ghana, we had promoted the Black Stars, and Vuvuzela had done such a phenomenal campaign. The Voice of America radio in the United States thought that I would be a good candidate in pushing training and teaching digital. So amongst journalists, so I trained some journalists from Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, did a couple of apprenticeship programs for young people in Osu and the surrounding areas, and really immersed myself in collaborating with young people, and some of the founders of Hack Lab, some of the founders of Girls Need Coding, Divas in Vogue as well. Quite a number of people that you guys may be familiar with during that time. And about a year and a half into it, so I maybe for those of you who may be religious or intuitive, there's a calling in my life. So every time I have that nudge, even though sometimes it's uncomfortable, I quickly react to it. And so there was a calling for me to teach, to learn how to teach. So the teaching aspect from the YouTube and some of the workshops I was doing at Impact Hub led me to join Africa Leadership University in Mauritius. So I packed my bags and I moved to Port Chambly in Mauritius, and I was teaching entrepreneurial leadership for a year. And that got me asking about systems, because you can have entrepreneurs, you can have effort, you can have energy, you can have all the vim in the world, but you need conducive ecosystems and environments in order to leverage that. Yeah. So I found out about an interesting program led by an all-African faculty, Dr. Duran Simoni. And so I moved to South Africa, WITS, and enrolled in a master's in an innovation management program at WITS Business School. And I've been doing some research, so it's opened up quite a number of opportunities. So I'll share what some of the learning, some of the research that's ongoing has been, some of the work that we get to do that relates to innovation, digital transformation as well. So.
Wow, boy, that's a lot. I believe that there probably may be more, but probably because of time, you just shared a few with us. So let's just get right into the conversation. So our topic of discussion is learning and the age of digital transformation in Africa. One may ask, what is digital transformation?
That's a really good point. And digital transformation, there are a few reports, there's 4 Hour and others, but digital transformation in the way we look at it is taking a lot of our commerce, our actions and services, and putting it online in a way that is accessible in on online platforms or in a digital arena. The transformation aspect means that it then changes, hopefully for the positive, because not every transformation is positive, but it's implied when we speak to it, that by adopting these online practices, services, perspectives, tools, and whatever, we take in-person practices that maybe could be limited by scale, geography, etc., and hopefully we can add value to it. So for us, in our context, digital transformation in Africa means how are we able to hello, if you're on the call, can you please mute for us? We can't hear.
Morgan, can you kindly mute everyone and then probably just the two of us?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, I think maybe I may have the ability to mute people if they're not already muted. But yes, so I think.
Yeah, I think it's okay now. Yeah. Morgan, I think you muted him. Can you kindly unmute him? No, just 1 minute. All right. So yeah.
Okay, good. So digital transformation on our end is how then do we adopt online practices that best suits us? I think that means that one, our local indigenous practices have to be digitized, which we can speak a bit about that, but we're very far behind. I think where we are on it is because it didn't start from us. We seem to be catching up. And so that also is a bit in my research. And so what happens with catching up is it's almost like we are getting early competence. It's like when you are born in any other country that's not English, and it's a second language, you're just learning grammar, basic sentence construction. But if you're born in a space where English is maybe commonplace, then you do prose, you become a writer, you feel comfortable enough with the tools to start to create. So digital transformation for us is how do we use online tools and services in order to extend what would normally have been in practice to hopefully better ourselves.
Wow. So then from there, one we probably also ask, digital, we've been in the digital age for some time now. How has digital transformation helped Africa so far?
That's a good question. I think for a lot of us, we have specific metrics that would say that, okay, this is how it is positive and this is how it's negative. Like everything, the truth is somewhere in the middle and in between. So for us, it's been incredibly helpful because the way the methods in which we communicate and the infrastructure needed to communicate. So if you look at telephones, communication, if you look at what happens with any industry or any the industrial cycle, for example, you need manufacturers and inventors. And so in the global north, what we would call other like Europe and American countries, you would see that their manufacturing was spurred by wars where they were able to have telephone lines, communication devices. It was partly a necessity. We were not participating in that. So we did not have inventors focused on telephone, electricity, these type of foundational, some might call it industrialization things that would help. So even just factories and others, we were more early day beyond maybe just hanging around as humans into trade and commerce. So we were still at quite the early stage of trading amongst ourselves. Our wealthy people were traders who were traveling, trading goods and services. We did have our own currency, but we didn't use fiat or have sophisticated ones because we didn't have to. So fast forward after the wars, we now have these inventions from these other people that allow things like communicating to soldiers abroad, etc., that has now been adopted into industry, that allow things like intersection of different institutions that then becomes a research project that helps create the internet, then that by extension helps create Google. So for us, because we didn't have that history of creating our own inventions, we see the benefits and we've started to adopt it. All right, and so the way that technology has helped us are still on things that telephony and communication. For us to have cell phones and not to have created entire telephone lines across, which is costly. For us to be able to share money through mobile money practices as well. I think a lot of us think of sophisticated technology because they're exciting things like 4-hour augmented reality etc. But you come down to it, things like WhatsApp, because they allow the transfer of knowledge. So within groups, the things that Hack Lab is able to do, the workshops that is able to happen to different people, and the way that social enterprises have more of a mandate in order to boost their communities, the way they're able to activate and reach out to communities that really, if you went in the capital city of most of our places, people would not have been equipped in order to create that user experience. And another one could be in entertainment, so that it's not just a tech folk. I know most of us on this may be biased, but if we think about it, the reason why Afrobeats could have, as it stands, one from the production side of view, where we can add our flavor, and the consumption side of view, because you need that distribution channel. If you don't have that, your invention might be great. And for those of us who are students of innovation, everybody has the inventions that we haven't discovered everywhere, but the vehicle for it to be distributed and consumed is incredibly important. And technology is seemingly trying to bridge those gaps.
Yeah. Wow. Right. So then my next question would be, what are some of the technology trends in Africa's education?
Oh, excellent. Oh, me, I like that one. So I'll take the education and make it a bit broader. So education does not just encompass formal high school, college, and others. It also encompasses one, socialization, and two, transfer of knowledge. So one, if you take it back and you look at the trends, we're actually one of the continents that's been able to really learn quite quickly, because socialization means that what are the values in which a community shares with other people, and how do those values help each of us in order to do better. So technology has helped us, one, in the use of cell phones. So those of you who are UI developers, front-end developers, it's not natural for you to go to a screen and swipe left, right, or it wasn't natural 10 years ago for you to go to a screen and swipe from left to right. Technology has taught us all of these ways of doing things. On the education front, I think that it's also helped us be able to challenge a rote memory system. So in the formal education, I told you guys I went to Prosec, I took BC, I wrote SSE, I read Okonko, well, things fall apart, we'll call it Okonko. But for us, primarily, and I'm still quite young, and you can imagine the generations before that, you were rewarded by how much you could memorize and regurgitate on a test model. Now, you can actually question, supplement, and add to whatever you're learning in school because of access to cell phones, to laptops, and to content. So when I was in school, one of the things that we learn as an educator is we're now put in classrooms as if everybody learns at the same time. So from grade 1 to grade 2. I was one of those people, I didn't do class 5 because I consumed information a little faster. And that was it just meant that I had that ability, but people have different intelligence. But now, if I was there, I could learn other things and not wait for the school to reward me to move faster. And the flip is also true. There are quite a number of people who maybe they didn't do well in BEC, and during my time, there were no remedials for BEC, which meant that if you were not selected into the next class, it almost seemed as if you were doomed. Now online, you can actually get coding classes, you can get other classes that can help you, that are even maybe some would argue more practical to you becoming an economic agent than before. So on the education front, I think that there's been more options available. There's still ways to go because the learning experience is not great. Also because most of what we do, in as much as those who have power and money like to say we want you to be educated, what they're actually looking for is a certification. So it's not necessarily what you bring to the table, is the fact that you have a certificate from an organization they admire. That's what gets you the foot in the door. So those models are confounding factors. But the other beautiful thing is that being now on the teaching side and curriculum design side and on the strategy for education side, a lot more teachers and folks who may have not really wanted a career in teaching. Like most people that we know, very few of them were like, oh, I want to be a teacher. Now I can be empowered with resources so that the learning experience is so much better. So if you're a national service candidate and you're going somewhere, don't feel as if you are only sequestered to whatever curriculum they have in whatever region you're given. Now you can also teach with that as well. So on the education practical points, these are some of the characteristics that are showing up. The real thing though is there are few people who are trying to create platforms, and I may go into that a bit. For our education, we don't have enough contextualized examples in all subjects, so that if I grew up, so for example, I lived Agbawe, Kaswa. If I grew up in that area always, and I had to learn physics or coding or design thinking, for example, there are not enough learners who've changed the design thinking principles to match examples in my lived experience, so that I can, and I think that is the second wave that we need, people who can translate almost all core content, so that for us, we have examples. Americans do it all the time. If you take, I had to take the SATs in the US. If you have a geometric equation of some sort, and let's say you have to create, my favorite one I always like to say is like a pie, or like just well, somewhat of a triangle. And I remember taking the test, and at that time I had never played baseball. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe there's a baseball cap. But the example they used for a geometry question, and you were supposed to deduce that and understand that this is really what it's going to look like, is for baseball. So you have the pitcher. So if the idea of using that is, if you don't even remember the equation and you love baseball, it will remind you that this is what you're supposed to draw.
Yes.
For somebody like me, who born in Kolebu, that actually even destroyed my life even more. But so those are things I think for us, we need to also kind of unpack some of the curriculum in education, and technology has that, and so we're a little behind on that, but there's hope for the future.
Wow. So then one, I'm sure probably some of the questions our participants over here may also have is, what are some of the opportunities that lies ahead, especially when it comes to digital transformation in Africa?
That's a big question, and I'll answer it in 2 or 3 layers. The very first layer is, and I'll be very honest, because I think this is a special group of people, and I would want everybody on this platform to think very quickly on where we're losing and where we would, we have a very small window. I don't know if it's completely closed yet, but if we don't act fast, that window would dictate to us and our kids what a digital experience would be. So this first point is on how the reality of it. The reality is that we are all subscribing and paying rent to digital platforms and to my 5 or 6 companies. So for example, think of it like your PO box. No matter what you want, what you do, it's the post office service that can deliver a PO box. They have a monopoly on that. You can only rent a PO box in order to get your mail.
Yeah.
The internet is becoming the same with cloud computing. Because we don't have either private sector or government and researchers creating a consortium that allows both the research for highly skilled services around cloud computing, we're all going to have to be paying rent to Amazon, Google, or Microsoft. For me, that is sad. It means that equity share, no matter how much money you make, somebody's always going to be sitting somewhere and take a percentage of that. It's almost like we are all going to be renters, and none of us are going to own that. And for those who are economic thinkers, that's a problem. So for you guys who are on here, please start thinking. We have a small window because the adoption of these cloud computing services is still low on the continent. In the United States, you cannot go against Amazon. You've seen what monopoly looks like. Their drive is happening. Same thing now with Facebook. So when it comes to Facebook ads, Facebook now has the largest quarter 1 and quarter 2 revenues on ads because of Facebook, Instagram, and all the platforms that they own. You can't create, and back in the day when I was at MEST, there were MEST graduates who had their own ad platforms that they were selling. But now it's been completely obliterated. So I don't have the answers, but that's the first thing. We need to start thinking of our own platforms and joining groups so that we, even if we're not as big as Amazon, we give ourselves a choice. The reason why that's important is that then that way, when the shareholders are making ethical calls, they are making donations and others, it's not us asking somebody else for it. It is us knowing that we have access. And then when things like the pandemic happens, our government doesn't have to beg Facebook for our data. We're the ones who then partner with our government because the business has already been collecting the data and been making money. So it's critical. That's the first point. The second part, when it comes to digital transformation and opportunities for us, is I think that a lot of us are still, not intentionally, but we're still in expectance. So we've been socialized to think of annual updates, an annual update for the phone, an annual update for the software. So it almost makes it feel as if we're waiting for somebody else to think about innovative things. And what they do is they just listen to us and give us what we're asking for.
Yeah.
So what I'm hoping for is that a lot of us kind of go out on the limb and start to partner with research institutions, people who have businesses. A lot of folks, we're very entrepreneurial, but we end up breaking our resources into little bits instead of creating these consortiums that have network effects and can collaborate on resources. Then we should start tackling big problems. And the pandemic is a huge one. There should be no reason why we have over 50 different data monitoring and health. It's the same one population. Like, we should have a consortium of people. Each team maybe takes on the UI. Some people take widgets. Some people take connecting it with the University of Ghana, and that way, then it becomes a robust model of an application. But this idea of divisive thinking, and so everybody's creating a feature rather than an ecosystem. So I'll let it go. I know you have a few more questions. I'll end on that.
All right. So my next question is, are there any specific skills that has to be developed in this particular age we find ourselves in?
No, absolutely. I think that even for me, I'm a bit lucky during this ahead of these times where for the last month and a half, like, our lives have been interrupted. And I think for some of us, it's like, okay, we're just waiting for the vaccine, and others. Actually, no, it's almost like the internet. You can't take it back once it's been opened. The idea that this pandemic has made countries shut down, there will always be at the back of leaders' minds that this can always happen. So it's going to affect travel. It's going to affect trust. It's also going to affect businesses and the way we do things, because so this is more on my management side. There was a management principle that was introduced in the 80s and 90s from Japanese automobile leaders like Toyota and others to American automobile leaders. You didn't have to have a large inventory, or you didn't have to have, because it wasn't efficient, if you didn't have a demand for the market. So that made very good sense in the capitalistic system, but it made very bad sense when you had a catastrophe like a pandemic, where we don't have ventilators on standby. We don't have medical equipment on standby, because it's just, from our limited knowledge of what things happen, it wasn't something that we calculated for, right? So the skill sets that you need, everyone here, it's not necessarily, well, English now I've realized partly true, but coding, because unfortunately a lot of digital is by far and large, whether it's communicating. So English, take English seriously. I love all my Francophone folks. My dad is half French, but that is the lingua franca of things like support tickets and systems. Like, you can code in whatever language you want, but a lot of open source systems and others happens in language. The second thing is the ability to research. I think a lot of people take it for granted. When you go to a library, that's what you're doing, you're researching. But now online, there's never been a time that is more needed for somebody to be able to say, one, is this source really true? Is it verified? Is this information relevant? Is it just to get me emotional? And three, am I wasting my time? So I'm on a lot of WhatsApp groups, some of them even tech groups. And yes, initially you want to talk about this and what WHO did and what this leader did and whether North Korea's leader is dead or not. You don't have time for that anymore. If those things affect your current life, that's okay. But what now you need to find out is, what is the most legitimate kind of coalescing app? What widget are they using to collect information? Is it open source? Does it affect my next project? Where is money going next? Then you can sift through, is this a headline? Because sometimes people who are broke or need to raise funds, they're the ones in the news. The people who have money, they're quietly working. So what databases, what information are communities, whether it's Reddit, whether it's in some other group, is around the project you are working on to solve a problem. And I think that's one of the things. So research. And then the last thing is agency. I think agency just means that you have the ability to do something. And I know that a lot of people I don't take it for granted. Some people may be mourning, have friends and family that are victims of this pandemic. It's a mental and emotional shock. But we need us, those who have skills, talents. You need to wake up if the president of the United States is thinking about people injecting disinfectants, then it means that nobody knows what the hell they're doing. Like, I kid you not. It's not like
that's true.
Nobody knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
And they've not known, but because we were distracted and we had work and we were busying ourselves, we never had the moments to just stop and reflect. Now it's clear as day. Everybody is using whatever competence they have to do their best. So Chancellor Merkel, because she's a scientist, she's blessed to have a scientific framework to use that. What is your framework? And you have to use it to help our communities, to help us with what we have going forward.
All right. So I think you've shared a lot, and it looks like time is not really so much our friend. But I've got a last question before we could probably start taking other people's questions. So my last question is, what is the way forward to transform learning in the digital age, especially in Africa?
Ooh, my favorite topic. And I'll tell you people what I'm also working on. So as hopefully I'm answering this question, if you guys have any questions, please send it to our wonderful moderator.
Yeah, sure.
And then that way we can start hacking them one by one. So one, I think that, so in innovation, well, actually in business, asymmetry of information is what makes money. So when you know information about a company, their management practices, that's how you can invest. And people make money in the capital market for that. People make money because they have more information than their competitors, then they're able to leverage and execute based on that. So education is the dissemination of information to empower people to do what I just said. So education, making money, and sustainability are linked. They are linked in business, they are linked in finance, they are linked in investments. Excellent. What we are taught typically is to be great participants within a team of work whatsoever. We're not taught to be thinking and creators and ecosystem builders. And one of the things that's happened also when I joined or went to teach at university, the university and formal teaching model is broken. It was very effective post-wars and getting a lot of people in order to get rote memory, but it was also for rebuilding industrialized economies. After a while, these institutions are one, they're not able to take the population boom. Two, they're not as responsive as we need them to be. Because now, if you go through an apprentice program or you have a mentor, you learn more just by doing and quicker and more effectively than the curriculum process that the academy has done. The whole research panel publication cycle is really too slow. So for everybody listening here, I'm one, and I've started to partly record some of these webinars and others, but I'm starting to put in classes for online. Things like Udemy, Coursera. All of us on here have been on all of these online courses. How many of us have shared our knowledge? Why do you think that your knowledge is not relevant? Excellent. See, Ishmael, you have. And I think that that's what we need to encourage. We need to encourage more of us to learn, because how you share it and what you're sharing with the context you're sharing is going to be very different from what Will Smith would share. It's going to be different from what Brad Pitt would share. It's going to be, and the reason why we need that is now more than ever, because of the pandemic, our communities have to be sustainable. Whatever community you live in, I've lived in North Kaneshie, I've lived in Jolu. Now this year, I'm thinking, if I live in Jolu, what are the economic needs of Jolu? There are businesses there. Are they digitally connected? What are the telcos? What are the opportunities for learning? Is it coding? What schools are in Jolu? I know there's a elementary, there's a basic school. Are there any technical skills? Then all of a sudden, Jolu becomes an economic hub or activity. Then you start to solve problems. Then you ask yourself, how many hospitals are in Jolu? We need to start thinking like that, because if we don't, nobody's going to think about it at that level for us.
Wow. So I think it's time to move on to take questions. It looks like Michelle has a question. So let me go ahead to unmute Michelle. Michelle, I think you can, I don't know, just a second. Unmute Michelle. Michelle, can you kindly unmute yourself and then go ahead and ask your question? Okay, in the meantime, if anyone has got a question, you can just go ahead and then send them in. All right, so, okay, since someone is talking, okay. Okay, so just a second. So let's hear from Lord.
I'm unmuting everyone so that they can ask the question.
So if you unmute everyone, there's going to be chaos. So let's do one at a time. If you have a question, just raise your hand, and then Morgan will go ahead to unmute you, and then we take your question.
It's not Morgan, it's Chris.
Chris, yeah, sorry, Chris.
Sorry, raise my hand on this thing.
If I may, can we ask the people to type the questions? Then that way, in case they have.
I think that would be best. That would be best.
China has their own platform. Great question. I think in the chat, so you guys can drop it in the chat. I can see the chat here, and Ishmael and
all right, great.
Can actually touch on them. I think so. China is a very interesting case because a lot of people look at China very differently. Part of it from where they've come from, and two, they don't acknowledge the behemoth and over a decade-old civilization that's China. They participated in wars. They were part of Axis of Evil. They invented paper. They invented dynamite. They're not. We just woke up and decided to become kind of like a dynasty type of country. And at one point they wanted world dominance. They just ended up losing the war. That's one thing. The second part, because then that should let you know that China is not our peers either as a country, Ghana, in terms of the way they think of themselves as a collective. We started thinking of ourselves as Ghana less than 1957. They've been gone through different dynasties with civilizations. They've contributed to innovations, and they've contributed to wars. So they have a strategy that has always been global, whether it's been dominant through wars or through economics. And so China has a one belt, one Silk Road kind of strategy, which is similar to the Marshall Plan the United States executed post the World War in order to help Europe build. For them, they know that they have a huge population that needs the natural resources of our continent. So China having their own platform is part of their investments over the last 8 years, since 2010, but more emphatically from 2012. The way that we measure innovation is how many patents do you have, what are the research documents that are coming from your place, and then what are the products and services that you're able to put to market. And China, you guys have already seen it. By the time that these type of phones come to market, it means that they've reached a certain level of creating innovation and innovative platforms that's customized for them. So yes, they have their own platforms. Jack Ma is the ambassador, and he's leveraging through his fame with Alibaba in order to create these lion dens and others. But they have an agenda to serve their people, and they're one of the most populous countries in the world. And the whole point of having them on there, or understanding that, is one, so that we admire and appreciate what they've done, so we can learn from it. But two, so that we also know that, like, once somebody else comes, it makes us realize that, oh, America also has this technology and America has this agenda. Oh, okay, British and German technology, and whether it's in automobile and factory space, they also have their agenda. So for us on the continent, we don't have a platform. Honestly, we have spurts and ideas and ideations around. We do have a strong potential investment arm in NASPERS in South Africa. But the rest of the continent, unfortunately, you people are family, so I can tell you truthfully, it is woefully inadequate. What we do is we create front-facing or front stores off of other people's platforms, and then we resell them as our own. So we don't indigenously have our own, and so there's a lot of work to be done there. I was actually typing a question before. Okay, please type. Okay, thanks for the session. In your opinion, what unique form of tech innovation should Africa adopt in 4IR that fits our local setting rather than blindly using tech from? So okay, cool. Ishmael, can I go for that question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
Okay, excellent. So fourth industrial revolution is fascinating to me. I have a multimedia background, so narrative and storytelling is important. And so I think that some people have been able to jumpstart and make it seem like fourth industrial revolution is theirs. It's not for anybody. It really is like articulating what's happening post internet. So after us being connected and other things, there's some network effects. There's some what you might say innovation within innovation that has happened in the internet age. Some of them look like the ability to process a lot more data faster. Some of it looks like innovation in telemarketing and health. Some of it looks like virtual reality and creating beyond physical, really digital experiences that are quite emotive and have some effect. That being said, fourth industrial revolution isn't for the West, even because they've coined it, it's for us as well. Our experiences as we're living in this interconnected world, whether it's a hybrid of how we communicate, whether it's the fact that our grandmas and grandpas now have 2 mobile phones and how they negotiate that with their power usage and what type of solutions we have in order to help them. That's all part of 4IR. The problem though is because a lot of 4IR has been hinged on certain pillars, some of them being artificial or augmented reality, the Internet of Things, a lot of the West's private business have invested in these things. So it almost seems as if then we are the ones who are being test cases. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, one, we have an opportunity to own and determine what it means for us. 2, yes, let's use them, but let's also learn from China. Once they get these things, they adapt them to their use. If you've been to Asia or Singapore, none of their tech is in any foreign language. Sometimes it's even from the right to the left. It's in colors, navigation. Like I remember using Google Maps, and I worked at Google, I was familiar. And in Singapore, it was like a whole video game. Things were dropping from the top side, and it made so much sense because it was like, first it confused me because I was like, okay, this is a video game. But I realized I'd been socialized because Western culture deals more with words than with colors and expression. So maybe for us, 4IR means auditory and listening because we're storytellers and we have griot. So that's how we probably challenge it, find what's intrinsically good for us.
All right, so I think there's another question.
Yes, what's the impact of 5G on the current economic revolution, conspiracy theory, health, social, economic, culture, and the likes? Excellent. So 5G is very interesting, but I think we've overhyped 5G. The reason why I say that is this. I think 5G is necessary in progression in terms of adopting technology and upload and download of bandwidth. So for those, you guys, again, your family, your home people, but if nobody really knows, 5G just allows for faster internet upload and download. Like as we're going through this, we're transferring information, and this is what's being translated on our devices as images, voice, text, and sound. We've gone from 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, and for most of us, the most important thing about 5G, unless you're reselling it, is the fact that now you can send a lot more data quicker, which allows for some of these things like augmented reality, virtual reality at a faster pace. The reason why I'm not too worried, even before 5G became topical, there was like TVC white space, and it was investment in, once we were moving all the media broadcast platforms from analog to digital, there's all this TVC white space that you can also transfer data. And so people were trying to see if they could invest in other things in order to make access to internet or the sharing of information even easier. There were a couple of conferences on it. It was mixed reactions. 5G is more promising because it's built on already existing technology. What that does then is a lot of things like heavy data things like immersive experience sharing, data things can even be done faster at a cheaper rate. And so it won't have to be a research institution or a company with millions of dollars of valuation that can do that. You can do that in smaller countries, smaller companies, and with smaller groups of folks. Conspiracy theory, Charlie, one of the things I try to do, my mind is my everything. So there's certain things I don't listen to. God bless, what's his name? The pastors, all the religious leaders. But I also know, and again, that's why I was saying that it's critical for us to be researchers, right? I know the space and place for religious in my life, just like how I know the place for music, and I know the place for coding and logical arguments. I don't let them mix the two. Like I think the conspiracy theories about 5G having something to do with the pandemic is unfortunate. Yeah. There is a lot of propaganda that was coming out of China's response, and I think political leadership that interferes with economics, right? And I think for you guys, you have to also be discerning. These things are intentional. When we leave this when we cross this pandemic, the way that Africa dealt with China is going to change forever. The way that the world dealt with China, because of the pandemic and because of how information was withheld. And remember earlier on, I mentioned that information or asymmetry of information is what helps people make money. And so if countries had known earlier, we could have prevented loss. Yeah. There's nothing that's, so because of that, there's also like perception of trust, and that's how credit is built. So China's perception of trust is going to be hit. So there have been people who have been sharing that conspiracy theory, either to limit the perception of trust for China or to limit the perception of trust for Huawei, which is getting market share over traditionally Western dominant. So when you start looking at those things in these type of lenses, it helps you sift through conspiracy theory and to get to the bottom of it and know how it works for you. In terms of health, socioeconomic culture, I think 5G has potential. There's a lot of telemarketing. If you guys are familiar with Yahoo Clinic and you have a chance, if you guys are interested, reach out to Dr. Tamaklo. He's the son of Dr. Tamaklo who started Yahoo. I told you guys, I gave the Joel example. And he does a lot of telehealth at I think the new place. And what that would do now is, for us at a higher pace, like we're saying, transfer of data, if you're at 5G now, you can actually have supervising surgeons. So the cost of bringing them in, because you don't need everybody operating on the body at once, but you need the minds and they need to see and give responses. So those type of things people have talked about for a while. Those of you who don't like reading and research in school, just like academics and people have been putting these type of things in journals for a long time. Sorry, I know, 9 more minutes, eh? Okay, I can see from your eyes that you want me to.
Yeah, I think so. We'll take one last question and then probably that will just be about it. I think there's a question for you, but they're from Wanda.
Excellent. I want to have experience of online works, but I seem not to get an authentic one. I currently engaged at the formal sector, but I want additional experiences and engagements. Any sites to help? Okay, Wonder. So 2 things. What experience do you want to have? Is it a learning experience you want to have, or do you want to be able to share your experience online? I'll try and answer both. Online is this, and actually this is true. This is the difficulty about online and online for Africa, is that unlike school where somebody has vetted it and they know, okay, 1 + 1 is 1, then you go into geometry, then you go into arithmetic, and you go into calculus or statistics calculus. The internet is there, so you have to almost come in with a sense of what you know, and it's really hard because we all don't know what we need to know all the time. Sometimes you stumble on some things, and so for you to have an online experience that works, a lot of times you might have to copy. You might have to look at people that you admire in business and profession, people in other economies or spaces that are developed. So whether it's, for example, in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, whatever, they have a lot of expats who do digital and other things. They invested in having like an all internet city quite a while ago. India as well, they were also quite big in Microsoft era and doing telemarketing. So identify somebody who may not necessarily be in Ghana or Africa that you admire their business practice, right? And look at what they're doing. What are they reading? What are they searching for? Maybe by merit of their environment, they have access to things that you didn't know that you would need, but you start to research and learn from them. So that's always a good model. You need to always have a role model, like who's your benchmark, who, if you're able to end up exceeding them or doing better than that's great, but they end up being a guide, because otherwise you'd end up having a very crazy online experience that might not be beneficial. For you to be engaged, especially if you're in the informal sector. I think one of the things that before this pandemic was, how do we translate our human experiences online? And again, the history of the internet was really for research, for finance and others. So you can see that arts and culture is coming later, and it almost seems like it's expensive. So things like YouTube videos, Hulu, now we have TikTok and others are starting to show up, and that's a positive. But for me particularly, I think that, I think because I was part of these organizations when they were starting off, like Facebook was nothing. It was a campus platform that you needed .edu. YouTube, the first video, Hello World, was a video at a zoo and cats. So if you think about it that way, you're not intimidated at this, oh, it's a publishing platform. No. It started off of as basic as possible. So for you as well, I think, know that, take comfort in knowing that, like, YouTube literally started with a Hello World code. Facebook literally started with a very trash blue and white image of Zuckerberg, and the logos have changed. So it doesn't matter where you are at, especially in the formal community. What I would say is join and speak to folks in the arts curating space. There's some phenomenal people locally, Nabuke Foundation. I do some strategy work with Ministry of Art, Tourism, Arts and Culture as well. And there's people, especially Ghanaians abroad, again, who, because they're in these developed spaces, they're also thinking how to digitize informal engagements, whether it's selling clothes, batik, or concerts. So they can probably share with you resources that you didn't know that, oh, okay, now we can launch a Ministry of this thing health app online for a concert. But people have been doing digital concerts, and DJs have been doing IG lives for a while. So those are ways in which you can also inform yourself and be in the know.
All right, so I think time has actually eventually catch up with us, and we have to bring this session to an end. I'd like to say a very big thanks to you, Mr. Emmanuel Gamor, for taking your time to join us today, sharing a lot. I've personally learned so much from all that you've shared, and I believe our participants have learned also. We wish we could have continued this session for a longer time, but I'm sure there's probably going to be another session like this where we get to learn more from you. So, any final words you want to share?
No, absolutely. I think that if you just joined or you weren't listening earlier, our dreams are valid. You guys have all the skills that we need. There are some phenomenal people that I see on this page, right? From Ishmael Foster, Joel's on here, like really crazy people who are pushing the envelope. Keep doing what you're doing. Reach out to people. Let us support each other. Because through these type of things, we learn from each other. Comment on other people's things as well, but also look at other cultures. Like let's learn from them. China has innovative practices. The UK has, especially digital, when it comes to online. The UK, because of BBC and learning, they're really at the top of social media engagement. So follow some of the social agencies. There's a podcast that I was following on Social Bites, and they were talking about how now Snapchat is leading in democratizing augmented reality. You can do virtual reality through the Snapchat app. I was like, what? I didn't even know that's been completed. So find out for yourself, and also reach out. I'm happy to message all the time. I'm sharing a podcast and my research website that speaks to where my mind is now. Happy to collaborate with you, and everyone on here. You guys are also, somebody's looking up to you. And as much as, and I had to come to terms with that. I'm thinking that, Charlie, I still need to get my next million. You people, somebody's also looking at you thinking that they need to be the next Ishmael. So please give back to your communities as well, and let's carry as many of us up as we can. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much. I think finally we can call today's session an end. And so thank you very much once again. I think we see you again in another one. So thank you very much. See you guys all. So you can.
Thank you, Hack Lab, and happy fifth year. You guys are amazing.
Thank you, Gamor. Thank you, Ishmael.
Lastly, so before you go, you could probably share your social media links so other people get to follow you over there. I think either in the chat section or probably you could just see them.
Yeah. No, it's at EA Gamor for everything. You just, I don't pay with my digital, so there's a Wikipedia page. If you just type at EA Gamor, you'll find everything that I do on there.
All right. So thank you. Bye-bye for now.
Happy 5.